Hello, hello, hello. Today I am here with Orshika Julia, and we are talking about listening, learning, and loving yourself. This is a topic I think all the ladies need. So, super, super excited about this. We're going to have so much fun. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sabrina Victoria. I am the host here at Her Talk Show. And if you have not already subscribed, girl, get on that subscribe button. And there's always awesome things that we're talking about here to have you thinking differently about life and business. Let's jump right in.
Get ready, because today's guest is about to change the way you view your world. This is Her Talk Show, hosted by Sabrina Victoria.
Listening live, welcome. We see you jumping on. If you're listening on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay in the comments wherever you're at so we can send you some love. We have had over 500 women grace this stage, and we are adding another one to the list today. Orshika Julia is a daughter and sister of Hungarian refugees, mother of 3 amazing humans, and a survivor of domestic violence. She spreads her message about dating safety to university groups. I love that. Throughout the US. She also speaks at churches about how the church can recognize and support victims and survivors of domestic violence. Super excited for all of this today. Thank you so much for being here, lady.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited too. Such important topics, right? Both are just so important.
Yes, 100%. So you are bringing to us an amazing topic, and I love just reiterating the importance of loving yourself. I think so much in our world, especially as females, we have a tendency to put everyone else first. We're doing all the things for all the people, and we forget about hello, number one.
We do. And it's so sad. And, I think of it and I think, is it cultural? Is it generational? Where does it stem from? But realistically, it's all of the above, right? It is cultural because not every culture treats their females the same, right? And honestly, we're pretty fortunate here in the US that we're getting a little bit more equal. But it's definitely generational too, just the way I watched my mother serve everybody before she served herself, even if she realistically probably didn't serve herself at all. So, it's such a generational thing too. So we just have to find the strength to do it differently and leave a different legacy, because we're finally waking up and realizing that we're worthy of self-love and self-awareness and self-importance. So
yeah, definitely. So we've all heard love yourself enough, but you have 2 other key words before that: listen and learn. So I would like to kind of dive into that. What does this mean? What do you mean by listen?
So to listen to what? I'm sorry.
To listen to yourself.
Yeah, listen to what's important to you. And I'm not saying throw everything aside and do only what's best for you, but listen to your gut instinct. If you, for example, are dating somebody or married to somebody and your gut instinct is this is not good, to override that with logical thinking is doing a disservice to you. Right. And then in turn, if you have kids, a disservice to your kids, because then you're teaching your kids oh, it's okay to ignore your gut feeling. It's not okay to, your gut feeling, your intuition is there for a purpose, and it's to keep you safe. Sometimes a little too extreme to the safe, but who wants to parachute out of an airplane? Well, some people do, right? My gut instinct is oh, heavens no, that's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean I'm going to die because I parachute out of an airplane, right? So just listen to yourself, listen to your gut instinct, and really take that time to love yourself, to know yourself, and to trust yourself enough to be able to listen to that part of you. Because a lot of times when we go through trauma, let it be childhood or let it be adult or wherever, right? When we go through trauma, we stop listening to ourselves. Yeah. And that's when healing just takes so much longer. And it's an unnecessary waste of energy, really, because if you just hone in and listen to yourself, then that would kind of change the trajectory or help you jump more quickly further into where we're called to be, and that's healed.
Yeah. So how does somebody start to learn to trust themselves? I myself, not domestic violence, but narcissistic abuse. So everything except for hitting. So it took me a long time, I think it takes people different, lengths of time to kind of figure out that there's abuse happening. But, mine was almost a decade before I was recognized, like, oh crap, this is really bad abuse. But because I wasn't getting hit, I didn't know that. But the trust yourself, I remember that. I remember that in my story when I had first escaped and I'm doing life on my own, this real on, and it wasn't just like relationships. It's seeped into every area of my life, even riding a bicycle, even driving.
Right.
I remember this constant small itty bitty, like small voice constantly questioning if I can drive, if I can like trust myself to be on the road, to like look at the lights and know the difference between red and green and like stop at red and go at green. It like seeped in everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one this has happened to. So what are some means, like for individuals that are maybe just coming out, or they're thinking about stepping out and they're having that whole thought process of not being able to trust yourself? How do we begin?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to back up just a little bit because I was in the same boat. So the abuse started as narcissistic abuse, and then it turned physical. And once it turned physical, I was like, I'm out, I'm bouncing. But it's such a common misnomer that people think that just because it's emotional abuse doesn't mean it's as impactful as the physical abuse. I was in the same boat. I used to think, well, I don't have a black eye, I'm fine. But really the emotional scars are harder to heal than the physical scars. So if you're in a narcissistic relationship, you're in abuse. And it's important to recognize that so that you can start that healing process, so you can start that learning how to trust yourself. So it's really, really important to just take a moment and recognize that just because you don't have a broken leg or a busted skull doesn't mean you're not in an abusive relationship. So just, want to give that the moment that it deserves. But past that, so on to your question, how do you learn to trust yourself, right? It's in the little things. Like, are you going to buy Captain Crunch or are you going to buy Lucky Charms? Pick one. It's not going to be wrong because you like both. Nobody's going to yell at you. I had the hardest time picking out a couch when we finally escaped. I went couch shopping and I was like, is he going to like this color? What if it's the wrong shade of aqua? Who gives a flying fart if he likes the aqua? He's no longer in my life. It doesn't matter. And guess what? If I don't like the couch 5 years from now, I'll get another one. Yeah. So learning to trust yourself with the smallest of things, like knowing that you've been trained that it's red, yellow, green, right? You don't even have to know the colors. You just need to go, which one is it on? And follow the other people on the road, so it's those small, tiny steps, because it took small, tiny steps to break you down to not trust yourself. So it's going to take small, tiny steps to build yourself up, to trust yourself again. So if you love doing your nails, you're not going to get the wrong shade of pink. Stop beating yourself up, just show yourself grace and just, all right, you want orange instead of pink? Get the orange nail polish. It's okay. He's not going to yell at you for having red nails because he's not there anymore. So small, tiny steps to build yourself back up.
Yeah. And it takes time. What a great analogy with the buying of your couch. I've been out now for years.
Yeah.
7 years. And I just bought sheets like 2 weeks ago off of Amazon.
Yeah.
And this came up of, I haven't bought like sheets since I left. I've just been using my old sheets.
It's real.
And there was this thing of like needing to like refer to my fiance and make sure that the sheets, but my fiance said, just buy sheets. Doesn't matter. Just buy sheets.
It'll be
and
okay.
I had to like say that to myself like about a dozen times while I'm looking through patterns, just being like, I don't have to ask him. He just told me to buy sheets. He doesn't care. But I was like going back and forth, and literally in my head, like, is he going to like these sheets, or should I buy these sheets? Or are these sheets too loud? Or these sheets? And I literally bought sheets that I liked.
Right.
But it took me
and you're still here to tell about it.
But I'm like, I like these sheets. These are the sheets that I'm going to get. I'm not worried about anybody else's opinion. I love the sheets. And this all went on behind the scenes. Like I didn't like let him in on this. This was something that I was working on myself. But to what you're saying, it takes time.
It does. It does. I've been 12 years free and I've had white sheets because I didn't want to have to make the wrong choice. Literally. And so I would buy my kids gray sheets because it's not white, but, and I would have sheets that we moved with us, and I had sheets for 15 years because I didn't want to make the wrong choice. So then I newly got married like 6 weeks ago, something like that. I don't know. It's been good. And I wanted to surprise him with colored sheets. And I'm like, what if he doesn't like it? Exactly the same thing that you went through. And I'm like, girl, he's going to love it. Like he's not going to care, as long as you're hanging out in the sheets with him, he's not going to care. Right. So I bought navy blue sheets and I'm like, and it's been 12 years of freedom. Yeah. And the weight that we put on ourselves unnecessarily, just buy the sheets. You can get a whole other one and he's not going to yell at you. And guess what? If he doesn't like the sheets, get rid of his booty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. This is the thing. And this is why it's so important. Community is so important. This is why listening to podcasts. This is why getting into rooms with individuals who have been through it before, just so that you recognize that it's all part of the process.
Absolutely. And you're not alone.
Yeah.
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 That's huge.
And I think that's the learning part, when you're saying listen and then learn.
Yes.
So getting into conversations like this with individuals who have gone through it before, so you can kind of learn off of them.
Yeah.
What's your story with that as far as learning? How were you able to do that? What did you do? What was your journey?
Oh, yeah. So my learning, I'm just going to be totally vulnerable here. I thought that abuse only happened at a certain socioeconomic level. And I thought it was just for the uneducated. It was very naive of me. And I am not uneducated. And I was raised at a decent middle-class home, but that's what we saw on TV growing up was like, oh, you're white trash, you get abused, right? Nobody would think otherwise in the environment that I was raised in, but nobody spoke about it. It was happening. Nobody spoke about it. We just kept our mouth shut, right? Mm-hmm. So my learning was a little bit challenging, shall we say, because of my ignorance, because I didn't know any different, right? But I recognized the ignorance as I was going through it. And I'm like, oh, girl, that was just ignorant. That was just ignorant. But I was in my first group counseling after I got out of the abuse. And this girl came back. So it met weekly on Mondays. And this girl came back, one of my fellow ladies. She came back from Wisconsin. We were living in Chicago, so she drove an hour and a half up to her abuser because he wasn't allowed to leave the state for 14 hours of whatever, but she ended up with a black eye. And I was like, why are you so dumb that you would do that? Like, if you're already out of the abuse, why in that hour and a half would you not just turn your car around? Like, you purposely went to the abuse. So my learning was a lot of internal growth too, because I didn't understand, because I was the one who got out and never looked back. But then I learned that there are women who get out, but there's that trauma bond. Yep. I had no idea that that was such a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I had a huge learning curve. Like, I had to understand that domestic violence affects everybody, because it does. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic level is, what your gender is, what your race is, what your religious background is. Domestic violence or any sort of trauma doesn't care. They don't care about your zip code, right? It just doesn't. And so my learning was very eye-opening. So it was accepting for people for where they are in life. It was accepting me for where I was in life, in my ignorance. I had to accept that I was being ignorant. I'm not proud of it, but I can speak about it and I can speak to it, right? And just admit that I was kind of ignorant about it. So learning was hard. It took longer than maybe it should have, had I not been raised in such a bubble. And I'm not blaming my environment for being raised in a bubble. It was a great bubble to be raised in, but definitely added to the healing learning process for sure. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And I think also just being able to revert back and remind ourselves. And I love what you're talking about as far as it doesn't see race or culture or color or status or anything like that. But one of the things that I talk about a lot is knowing what a healthy relationship or healthy communication looks like helps.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Being able to compare.
Absolutely.
And if you weren't raised in that, to go learn, like what you're saying, what that is, you can look that up.
Yeah. And it's okay to show yourself grace as you're learning, because we're going to fall back into our old habits, into our childhood programming, and that's the part that I really learned a lot over the past 12 years, is showing myself grace and showing myself grace and showing myself grace. And I still do regularly, because I'm going to continue to.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be mean to myself like the abusers were mean to me.
Exactly. 100%. So as far as, stepping into your power, reclaiming your voice, what has been your personal experience with the, really being open and honest with what your story is?
Yeah, it's been a great experience. It shocks people, which isn't the reason I share, but they just don't expect that from my life, just because, people who have known me in my childhood probably didn't expect it. It shocks people because they're like, wow, you're that open and vulnerable about your story. And I'm like, how am I going to help other people heal? How are other people going to heal if we don't share the deeper stuff? And now, please understand that I have full respect for those who don't want to share it and want to keep that totally private. Zero judgment on that, because that's our own personal journey and our own personal choice. But being able to share my story and walking alongside of people has just been, I see why now I chose that path, because I chose to be in that relationship. I'm an adult. I made that conscious choice. Now, it stems from having low self-esteem, and I understand that now. Like, why did I end up in an abusive relationship? Well, because I had zero self-esteem at that time. I was a single mom of 2 young kids. I thought nobody would love me. Somebody came along and showed me some kind of affection, and I was like, oh, it must be love.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm so grateful for having gone through that and to be able to share the deeper stuff of that, so that other women don't feel alone and don't feel like it's only me. Because 12 years ago, domestic violence, domestic abuse was not spoken about at all.
Yeah.
It was still very hush hush. It's only been in the past 7 to 10 years that people started opening up about it.
Yeah.
And, for better or for worse, but I look at it as it's a for better thing. The circumstances that have brought women the voice to be able to speak, not the greatest, of course, but the fact that we're speaking now and we're being heard, that's so, so crucial. And it's so important too, to remember not to compare my story to your story, right? Because we're just not the same people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I know one of the biggest issues that I had was when I found out that what I was dealing with was not good. I remember having this conundrum internally of, well, what is it supposed to look like? Like, if this is not good, then what does good look like? It was like an actual real question.
Yeah.
Of, if those are red flags, then what are green flags?
Right.
For those that are thinking about leaving or are leaving or have left, not trying to project my story on anybody else, but there was definitely a lull of just anger and bitterness and frustration and feeling like I lost so much time. I could have been further along in a relationship, financially, mentally, just feeling like I lost so much time. A lot of bitterness was with that. I would love for you to talk about maybe some of the steps that you have taken, or maybe even some of the steps that you teach your clients on how they can start moving towards a better, more healthy life.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, recognizing that wasn't a better and healthy life, right? Because you've got to recognize that wasn't good. And simply just really taking stock of what wasn't good about it. And then doing the opposite. Like you said, like, you've got your red flags. So if a red flag is somebody's punching you then the green flag is you're getting gentle, kind touches, right? And so just recognizing what were the red flags and then looking for the opposite, because the opposite will be your green flags. And then a huge thing that so many of us who have come out of abuse struggle with is finding that worth, that self-worth. We don't think we're worthy of the green flags. We don't even think we're worthy of the orange flags, honestly, when we're fresh out.
Yeah.
We're like, we deserve the red. We're horrible. You're not horrible. You know, and it's not going to be an overnight thing. You're not going to go from red flags to green flags and like, oh, this gentle touch is good versus like, I'm getting the crap beat out of me. Right. Which I didn't, just anyway. But anyway, was going to, but I left before then. But anyway, just recognizing that you're worthy of the orange flags, and then you're worthy of like the yellow flags, and then like one green flag. Again, it's those small 1% needle point moves that are so important. Yeah. And so that's what I teach my clients, is just accepting the good and focusing on that good, focusing on the gratitude. I have friends who have gone through things similar to yours in my story, and they're still wallowing in that. Oh, my life is awful. And I'm like, okay, 3 things you're grateful for every morning, no matter how crappy your day before was. And then 3 things you're grateful for every night. Say them out loudly, write them in a journal, whatever your preference is, you know, living in that gratitude. And that doesn't mean that life is going to be easy every single day, but it means that you've exercised that gratitude muscle so that it's going to be a stronger muscle versus the tormented and, you know, awful muscle. It's a muscle. Gratitude is a muscle. Happiness is a muscle. You're not going to get there just waking up one day and be like, Susie Sunshine. You know, it's hard work.
Yeah. What really hit me with what you just said is the very first sentence of somebody hitting you. The opposite would be somebody touching you gently. Because right before you said that, I thought to myself, somebody who doesn't touch you. And that could actually be also not a good sign of somebody who doesn't want to touch you.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, really taking time to figure out the opposite, not going with your initial thought process, because your initial thought process could also be skewed.
Right.
So yeah, really taking the time to what is the actual opposite of that, and meditating on that.
100%. And it's okay if you don't want to be touched. Like if you've gotten the crap beat out of you, or if you got raped, you're, you know, it's okay to not want that interaction as you're healing. It doesn't mean that, you know, somebody's going to punch you and then the next guy is going to touch you gently and you're just going to curl up on his lap and purr like a sweet little kitty cat, right?
Yeah.
You know, give yourself that grace. If you don't want to be touched, don't be touched.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really checking in. And that's what you were saying, is listening. So really listening to yourself and what you need internally, and not letting somebody else's opinion or needs, you know, what would that be? Move you?
Influence you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very, very true. Creating an identity outside of abuse.
Whew.
I know that when I first left, not all I talked, but a lot of my conversations were still around within, you know, 2 minutes of meeting somebody, I'm vomiting out my abuse story. It was like part of my identity. How do we begin to create an identity outside of that victim story?
Yeah. So find a hobby. And that was hard for me to re-find myself through hobbies. And it doesn't matter what the hobby is. If it's underwater basket weaving, talk to people about underwater basket weaving and how that's possible. You know, it doesn't matter if somebody hates cats, but you have 3 of them and they're your lifeline. Talk about their weird, quirky, beautiful personality. I don't know why I'm picking on cats today. Dogs, fish, snakes, chickens, reptiles, whatever your jam is, right? If you don't like pets, then talk about, oh, I just took this picture. I'm looking outside and the beautiful farmland is what I'm doing. I just took this beautiful sunset picture, and do you want to see it? You know, like if you took it on your phone or whatever the case is. So again, it's exercising that muscle that the world doesn't revolve around your abuse. Even though our world revolves around our abuse, especially when we're freshly out, the rest of the world wants to know more about you and wants to get deeper. But it is a self-protection thing, because if we talk about abuse, then they won't know me. They'll know my situation. So it's a protection for sure. But again, small steps. Everything is small steps to that healing journey, isn't it? It's just, and if you don't have a hobby because you're lost in the world, then ask them about their life, and they will open up and word vomit, and then find one little golden nugget that you can help, hook onto, like, oh, you were a figure skater. Yeah, I did that for a few years. We skated on a pond as a child. And allow yourself to have those fun memories come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some different stories. I just did an exercise with my mastermind yesterday evening on storytelling. And I asked like 8 or so questions to get them to write down all the stories, because so often we stick to 1 or 2 of the like big traumas or the big wins in our life. And that's kind of how we identify ourselves, is either by that one good or bad or whatever stories there are. But we're made up, like what you're saying, we're made up of so many more stories. What are those?
Right. And finding those thousands of tiny little gems, and they're endless. Our stories are endless, like the stars in the sky. And it sounds cliche, but it's so true, right? Because our stories are what make us us. And they're different from everybody else's stories. Even if you grew up in a big family and everybody had the same Christmas, your Christmas is going to look different than your siblings' Christmas, because we're different human beings. And so focusing, I love that you did that with your mastermind, because focusing on those other stories is so important. Just again, so we can start living in that gratitude instead of that dark, dismal, yucky place.
Yeah, for sure. As far as limiting beliefs, I know that we all grow up with limiting beliefs just from our childhood, society, culture. But I think those that fall into any sort of abusive relationship, abusive or not, start to create other limiting beliefs because of that situation. What is a limiting belief that you had developed, maybe before or maybe during that relationship, that you have been working on or have gotten rid of, and how have you pivoted away from that?
My biggest limiting belief was understanding, how I limited myself is to not realize that I was worthy of love different than what was received. I just didn't feel like I was worthy of the green flags instead of the red flags. Exactly what we spoke about a few minutes ago. And so I just kept working on myself. I mean, that sounds generic, but I just kept telling myself that I'm worthy of the caramel on the sundae. I'm worthy of the cherry on top. And you know what? Now I ask for 3, because I can have 3 maraschino cherries on top of my sundae, because I love those things. Others don't. That's cool. Don't ask for them. Give them to me. But just like, you're worthy of the little beautiful blessings each and every day. And then you realize, oh, you're worthy of a healthy relationship. And, my husband and I have been together, like I said, married for 6 weeks, known him for a few years. And I didn't think I'd ever be worthy of the love that he gives me. But I know that I am, because I have 3 maraschino cherries on my sundaes. It's, again, I keep saying it's the small steps, but it's so true. It's the small steps of understanding your worth. Like, you're worthy of buying that bracelet, even if it's not on sale. If it's in your budget and you budgeted $10 for a bracelet, it doesn't have to be a $200 bracelet on sale for $10. If it's a $10 bracelet, spend the $10 on the bracelet. You deserve it.
Yeah. Absolutely. What are some signs for maybe those that are, by the way, we have a ton of people watching live. So thank you so much for being here, hanging out with us. If you are watching us on the replay, I always say #replay in the comments so we can send you some love. Whether you're watching this an hour later or a few days later, we'd love to connect with you. But I want to ask, for those maybe listening now or on the replay who maybe haven't dealt with this, maybe they're just interested. Maybe they're caught. They can't change the channel and they're just listening in the car, and they can't press next. What are the signs? What are some things that maybe individuals who don't know much about this can look for within their friends, within their parents, maybe within themselves? I know that if I had heard about abuse before, it never even connected for me
Right.
until it did, right? Years and years later. What are some signs that people maybe that are off to the sidelines can kind of just be aware of in their life so that they can start being a lifeline maybe for somebody that they wouldn't, like what you said, who maybe have a stereotype of it only happens within certain sex, and then recognizing that you're their neighbor,
Right.
and it's happening to you.
Yeah. So some of the signs, they're so subtle. I mean, if it's not a black eye or a broken arm or marks on the arm, or, it's so subtle, especially the emotional abuse and spiritual abuse and financial abuse. But a huge sign is the person has to answer a phone call frantically. Let's say you're out having coffee with a girlfriend and she's like, oh my gosh, I got to get this. Just 1 second. Okay. Because he's going to be really mad.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a huge sign. Or if she does this while you're at coffee, always checking her phone, because if you don't answer, if she doesn't answer, then she's going to get the shit beat out of her at home, right?
Yeah.
In whatever way. It might not be physical. If the person that she's dating, married to, whatever, shows up at your lunch date just to make sure she's there. Yeah, especially if she didn't say, oh, by the way, I invited so-and-so, or I let him know that I'm going to be here. He might stop by. There's a difference between that and, yeah, well, I had to tell Bob that we were coming here just because he likes to know where I am. It's a problem. It's that listening to yourself. Are you telling this person because you love them and you want to share life? Like hubby and I, of course I tell him, I'm going to go have lunch with so-and-so and we're going to be here. As opposed to the abuser. So I'm going to go have lunch with my friend and we're going to be here. Yeah. It's listening to yourself, and it's like the energy with which you share the information. It's either this, that somebody's sharing the information, or they're like, oh, this is what's going on and this person's going to know about it. And it's so exciting. So listen to those and watch for those subtle cues for sure. And if she's not allowed to go anywhere without him, it's a problem. It's a big problem. Yeah.
Yes, to all of that. And all of that was seen in my relationship.
Same, sister, same.
So much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I thank you so much for being here.
Love it.
For hanging out with us. This was amazing, amazing insight. So you have Out of the Quicksand.
I do.
What a great name.
Thank you.
We obviously have a really good idea of what you do, who you help. But if you could do me a favor,
sure.
For those listening live or on the replay, of who exactly should be reaching out to you, who should be referred to you, who should be following you, who do you help?
It's so funny because they always say that the riches are in the niches, right? And you're supposed to narrow down when you're running a business. You're supposed to get as niched as possible. But here's the thing with domestic violence. It doesn't care who you are, right? So who I help is I speak to the young adults at universities because it's important for them to know dating safety so they don't end up in the abusive relationship, right? Who I help is churches to recognize what the abuse looks like, because unfortunately churches are not well versed in that. They're getting there. So I help those. And honestly, if there's somebody out there that just wants a sounding board, please connect with me. If you want to drop me an email, it's Orshika@outofthequicksand.com. If you want to drop me an email and say, this is my situation, am I in abuse? I have no problems telling you straight up one way or the other, because recognition is your first step to being free from it, right? So I help those college students so that they don't get into the situations you and I have been in, because I didn't know there was anything such as red flags and orange flags. And all that. And it's so important. Really, our religious communities just mostly kind of suck at helping victims and survivors. Yeah. And it's important to be helped everywhere, right? Because church is supposed to be, if you're a churchgoer, that's supposed to be a safe place. And if you and your abuser both have attended the same church and they're picking the abuser side because he's been on the elder team or he plays, guitar or whatever, and he seems all good, it's important to recognize that what's behind closed doors may not be what's up front, right? And dealing with that. Yeah. Yep.
And I've seen that so much.
Yeah. And that's what draws people away from church, which is sad because then it draws people away from God. And like for me, God was a huge part of my healing journey, like huge. I don't know how people do it alone without faith. And I'm not saying you have to be Catholic or you have to be, Protestant or whatever. I'm not saying religion, I'm saying faith, right? And people are drawn away from the church because of the ignorance of a lot of churches. So
absolutely,
it's a mission to wake them up.
Yeah, definitely, and educate them.
Correct.
On things like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. Where can people find you? You have your website, outofthequicksand.com. Where do you hang out on social media? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram, Out of the Quicksand. Making it just as simple as can be. And again, if you want to email me, it's my first name, Orsika, at outofthequicksand.com. Get a hold of me on Instagram. Get a hold of me on Facebook. Instagram is a little bit more user-friendly with DMs than Facebook is, to me anyway. But I'll find you. Just be patient. Please show me the grace like I show everybody else, right? Or do my best to. So yeah, Out of the Quicksand.
Awesome.
That's where I am.
Well, outofthequicksand.com is the website. It should be in the clickable link in the description wherever you're watching us at. She hangs out predominantly on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure you follow, like, and share. We love to connect people here on this platform in order to make sure we all continue to rise. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Absolutely. So this one gets me because it still touches me in here. Ladies, you are worthy. You are worthy of love, of loving yourself, of learning who you are, of listening to yourself. You are worthy of a good, healthy, happy, non-abusive life. And if that means you have to do it alone, you're going to be stronger alone than you are with the abuse. You are worthy of getting out and staying out and never, ever going back in there. Just do the work. It's not going to be easy. Find that community. There are people out there who will love you, raise you up, raise your arms up when you get tired. Just know that you are deeply worthy of a good, happy, peace-filled life.
Ditto on all fronts. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
This brings us to an end of yet another incredible episode of Her Talk Show. Thank you for taking your time to share some wisdom and inspiring us all. To our dedicated listeners, thank you for staying with us until the very end. Remember to follow, like, and share. Once again, I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I invite you to join our amazing community, Her Nation, where we continue to have conversations just like this. Until next time.